Now, what about this? A recording of NASA, the head of NASA, talking to Lyndon Johnson. And Lyndon Johnson said, "Damn you, you promised Kennedy you'd get a man on the moon. Now, when are you going to do it?" And NASA said, "We can't do it. The radiation up there will kill the astronauts." And then on the recording is Lyndon Johnson slamming his fist on the desk and saying, "Damn you, you get me a man on the moon within 2 years or I'm closing NASA down. I'm sacking a lot of people." What I'm going to give you now is the real story behind this from day one. We're going to be going back to a year, maybe 1968. Let me tell you the true story about this hangar. Okay, folks. I can't give you an exact date, but it may be in about 4 years ago. It may have been just before the pandemic. When I was searching on the net, I come across a certain report about a summit going on regarding Apollo. Now, I can't remember where I got it from. It may have been in a magazine. But I got this story, and it was quite interesting. What it was, I can't remember the name of the guy involved, but there was this summit going on in some room somewhere regarding Apollo, and one guy stood up and he said, "Let me give you my experience, a very strange experience with me regarding this Apollo." He said, "My name is," but I can't remember his name. He said, "I'm an aircraft technician. And one day I had to bring a plane to this certain hangar for repairs. I brought the plane there. I went to the hangar and there was this door. I opened the door, I went inside, and I looked around in amazement. What the hell's going on here?" I said to myself. He said all the floor for this hangar was covered in soil, maybe about 3 or 4 inches of soil, and there was rocks and stones about here, there and everywhere, and certain pieces of equipment that I don't recognize, or I didn't recognize. And he said the walls were all painted with white mountains and hills. And he said on the side, I noticed 2 white suits hanging down. My first impression was that they were diving suits, but I soon changed my mind on that. I couldn't make out what was going on in this hangar. I thought, how the hell am I going to repair a plane in here? He said, I thought, I better get out of here. He said, I went out, I shut the door behind me, and within a couple of minutes outside, I was suddenly surrounded by armed guards. I had guns pointed at me. And one said, "Hey, who the hell are you? What are you doing here?" He said, "I'm an aircraft technician. I brought a plane here to do repairs on it in this hangar." And this guy with a gun said, "Well, you're at the wrong end. Get up the other end. This is out of bounds. Don't come back here again." And then he said, "By the way, did you go inside there?" I said, "No, I didn't go inside there because it's locked." "That's okay then," he said, "get moving, get down the other end and don't come back here again because it's out of bounds." Righto. I carried on. I went into the hangar the other end and I done my work on the plane. And a lady got up and she said, "And where was this hangar?" He said it was at, I'm not going to tell you yet. I'll tell you later on. But he told her where it was. And I should be giving you the photo of it. Now, folks, the next thing this guy said, he said I had an audio tape in my house. He said it was an audio tape of Lyndon Johnson speaking to the head of NASA. Lyndon Johnson had the head of NASA come to his office. And he said, "When are you going to get me a man on the moon?" And the head of NASA said, "Sorry, Mr. President, it can't be done. The radiation up there will kill the astronauts. We cannot do it." And he said there was a big thump, a bang, bang. He said Lyndon Johnson slammed his fist on the desk and said, damn you, you promised to get Kennedy a man on the moon. If you can do it for him, you can do it for me. He said, I'm giving you 2 years. If you don't get me a man on the moon within 2 years, I'm sacking the lot of you and shutting down NASA. Okay? Now, folks, that guy then said, I don't know where it's gone. He said, but that tape has disappeared from my house. Brings back memories of the experiences that Bart Sabrell has had, doesn't it? Now, where we can't give exact date of this conversation, we can only estimate the date. And we got from Bart Sabrell's video, Moon Man, that it was 1968, 1 year before Apollo, that Lyndon Johnson was witnessing them faking the Apollo 11 landings at Cannon Air Force Base. So, this discussion with the head of NASA must have been just prior to Lyndon Johnson accepting the fact that they had to fake it. So it looks like it's the early part of 1968. Now, folks, remember earlier on I told you this guy was asked by another lady at that meeting, and where was this hangar? Well, I can now tell you what he said. He said it was in Chicago. So what I done recently, I started doing a bit of research. I plotted into Google aircraft hangars, Chicago. And you'll be surprised there was plenty of them. Plenty of them. And I went through every one of them, and look what I found. Just take a look at it. And here you are, folks. There's that hangar that I discovered at Chicago.
Let me go on. I got the airplane all fixed except for some little parts, a handful of parts. And that's what caused the fire anyway. The exhaust system came apart and I needed the bolts to bolt it back together. So I got on the radio on the airplane and called Minneapolis, and they said, go to the giant hangar. There's a hangar that's a mile long. It had 8 bays, and we could put 5 airliners in each bay. That's how big it was. We could put 40 airliners in that, like DC-6s and whatever. So I went to this hangar, and in the giant doors that they bring the aircraft in, there's small doors. So I went to the first one, it was locked. Second one was locked. Third one was broken, and I opened it, and bells went off, and I said, uh-oh, I shouldn't be in here. But I had taken a few steps inside the building, and the entire hangar from one end to the other was filled with dirt. The walls were painted with like white mountains, and it was all black up above it. So I walked in, I turned around, and as I did, there was what I called 3 white deep sea diving suits. I later found out they were space suits. And this funny looking contraption that I had never seen before. And there was cameras and lights and all the stuff like a movie set. So I turned around, I yanked that door shut, and it wedged shut like it was locked. And I took about 2 or 3 steps from the hangar when armed guards came at me and, "What are you doing here?" So I explained to them that was my airplane. They told me to go to this giant hangar. And they said, "Not this one, the other side of the field." So they escorted me over. I got my parts, fixed the airplane, ran it up, gave it to the crew, and the crew flew it off, and I went home. And they landed on the moon, and I'm sitting there watching. I said, "Those son of a guns." That's what they were doing. They were making this movie. And so I started researching what they did. And there were some other engineers that were interested in this also that I got connected with. And we had 57 questions, and we took it to NASA and went up to Brian Welch, who was the spokesman for NASA at the time, and said, "We have some questions we'd like to ask." And he looked at them and said, "These are so ridiculous, I'm not going to take time to answer one of them." And we said, "We paid for this. This is our tax money. You have to answer our questions." And he said, "No, I don't. We can get the air police and have you escorted off." So we more or less gave up, but I never did. I still been researching, and I've got more than 57 questions I'd like answered now. Several other organizations that put on seminars, and we had astronauts from all over. I got to know Brian O'Leary, who was supposed to go to the moon, and to Mars. And I took class that Edgar Mitchell was teaching. He was the 6th man to step onto the moon. And I said to him one day, "It must be tough to live that lie." And he got red in the face, and he said, "You're here to take my class. Don't you ever mention the moon to me again." Yeah. So later on, I was doing, I set up the projectors, the mics, and whatever they needed for the sound system for the seminar. And then I made the tape recordings of these lectures from the seminar, and we sold them. And a guy came up to me and said, "I'd like a tape that you just made." So I gave him one. And he said, "Instead of paying you, I'd like to trade you." And I said, "What's on your tape?" And he said, "Don't listen to it till you get home." So when I got home, I taped it and or listened to the tape. And it was President Lyndon Johnson. And you hear him hit the table with his hand. He said, "Damn it, I told you guys." And they said, "But sir," he says, "don't you butt me. You promised Kennedy you could get him a man on the moon, and you haven't done it. Where are you?" And they said, "Sir, there's a Van Allen belt. We can't get through it. The guys will die if they go through it. It's radioactive. And if they get on the other side, this radioactivity from the sun will kill them. There is no way we can do it." And he said, "You're going to do it. You got 2 years. If you don't get me a man on the moon in 2 years, I'm closing NASA down. You'll be fired. You'll never work in the United States again." And he slammed the door and walked out. And so they hired Stan Kubeck, I believe it was the guy who made the movie, and we've never gone. George Bush, the first George Bush, Pepe, he called Sally Ride into his office and said, "Would you please come in and talk to me?" So she did, and he said, "I'd like you to get a crew together, knowledgeable people, and put your heads together and tell me how soon you could get me a man on the moon." And she said, sir, that's a pretty tall order. And he says, I know, but he said, I want to know how soon we could do it, and if we could do it, and any idea of how expensive it would be. So she came back and said, sir, if you gave us an unlimited budget, we might be able to do it in 28 years.